So, I've been playing God of War games for a while now, going all the way back to the previous games on the PS2, and even though I didn't agree with all the changes they made with God of War in 2018 after the big reboot, I understood that that was just the most understandable step, and they just had to modernize their game. They just had to make some changes, and I understood that it made sense. But even though it made sense, there's just some things I don't agree with, and I really think some bosses don't belong. Some enemies don't belong in God of War, especially with the way the game plays now. So I recently beat the game on the hardest difficulty, and the whole time I was trying to beat every single boss or mini boss without getting hit at all. I successfully did so, but also I realized that some bosses do not belong in this game. Remember in 2018 they had Draugr, and the Draugrs were the most basic enemy you will encounter in the game, and by the time you were done, you would have fought 3 to 400,000 of Draugrs. Thankfully now in God of War Ragnarok, you don't fight much Draugrs, but they turned some of them into mini bosses called Hateful, and that name couldn't be more fitting, more accurate, because I hated going against those guys every single time. There are 6 of them, 6 hateful bosses, and I hated every single one of them because depending on your level, it's going to go from fairly meh to super annoying. Super annoying. Mostly because those guys do not stagger. They do not respect the concept of taking turns, and whatever you do, it always feels like it's never your turn to hit them. And when you do hit them, they're not going to wait for you to be done. They're going to hit you while you hit them. It's not about waiting for each other's turn. No, they hit you all the time. And when it is your turn, if you do want to land a hit, you have to chase after them because they're going to just go around running like rabbits. Like, God of War has become a chasing simulator, and I really hate that. Nothing is safe. Your running attacks, which used to be so good, now it's so unsafe to use those running attacks because they're going to get locked in an animation, and you also have so many unsafe moves you cannot cancel. So everything is like high risk, very little reward. Very little. And I remember also that there used to be a boss, the Dark Elf King, in God of War 2018, and that guy was so annoying and on so many levels because he would just run around. That was actually the first boss which would do that, and I was super annoyed by that one guy in particular. Well, you also encounter some variations of that Dark Elf King in Ragnarok, and again, it is one of the most annoying enemies in the game because all they do is fly around, leaving tiny bombs which eventually explode and blind you, and that's all they do. They shoot bombs, they drop bombs, and they fly away. So the whole time you are super annoyed because even if you have, the only way to actually capitalize on those fights is to either have a super damaging build or to have rem shift to get some hits in before they eventually go away, because you can be sure, rest assured, they will eventually go away. And that boss, that design was already pissing me off, but they had to take it to the next level and introduce the Berserkers. So listen, I was glad when they introduced the Berserkers, like some kind of side quest where you defeat multiple Berserkers to eventually fight the big one. The same way they did with the Valkyries, and where you go through like 8 of them to eventually fight Sigrun, the Valkyrie Queen. But the Berserkers are nowhere close to being as fun as the Valkyries were, because imagine everything I said before. The fact that they just run around, the fact that you basically have your turn does not exist. You spend not even half the time. I'll say 80% of the fight against a Berserker is you chasing after them. 80%, because they just come in next to you, hit you twice or try to hit you twice, and then they go away. Every single time. And sometimes you're going to go against not one, but three of those guys at once. And it is so annoying. Going up against a berserker was never fun. And mind you, I beat every single one of them, even going up against 3 of them without getting hit and just trying to make the fight somewhat stylish. Because if you do have combos, guess what? You won't be using them unless you use Rem Shift, because they just run around, they just run away. Oh, and you want to use your running attacks? Guess what? If you use them, they can just ignore the stagger, come next to you, and then kill you. Yeah. So basically, you have almost no tools. You are supposed to be the God of War, and you can't do shit. You can't do shit. Like, they made me feel so powerless. And then comes the king, who takes this whole frustration to the next level, because he has all the previous moves of all the previous berserkers, and especially he runs around even more. He can go across the whole arena and start those animations, and the only way to interrupt him is to perform a shield strike. But hey, you are so far away, how are you going to perform a shield strike? Well, you can't, so you're going to die. Yeah, he can teleport across the whole thing, and there is nothing you could do about it. And I just don't understand that. That's why I said I feel like some bosses do not belong in the game, because if you make bosses like that, I expect to have the kind of mobility to actually keep up with them. But I don't. Kratos is not Speedy Gonzalez. Kratos cannot run like a whole mile in 1 second. No, he can, but those guys can just teleport away. They can just teleport away. I don't understand. I don't like it. I feel like those bosses of all games, God of War of all games is not the kind of game where you will find those kind of bosses. It wasn't the case before. It was always back and forth. You can go check on YouTube the boss fights in the previous God of War games, and you're going to see that there was almost no break. No, like, the flow of combat was maintained. But now, sometimes you just sit there, waiting, and even the Valkyrie Queen suffers from that, and it was already something they started doing in 2018, because again, the Valkyries were not flawless. They would sometimes do that too, but at least they were more aggressive, which meant that the chasing around wasn't as much. They were still trying to kill you. The Berserkers are just trying to mess with you. That's the difference. Hey, hit me twice and then I'm gone. I'm gone. And I have to give it to them. The enemy diversity in God of War Ragnarok is so much better than it was in 2018. You encounter so many new enemies with very different movesets, but it doesn't mean much when all they do is laugh at you whenever you're trying to attack them. It doesn't make sense. It really is annoying, and I don't know if we're ever going to get another game like God of War. I mean, with because I don't know if I don't want to spoil anything, but the way it ended, I really want to. I want to see more. But for the love of God, if you do include more, or if you want to make something with DLCs, for the love of God, design better bosses, design interesting bosses. Thor was fun. Baldur was fun. I love going against dragons and trolls because guess what? They're so fat, so big, they can move around like all the little guys can. So going up against a troll, I like those. Like I missed trolls in God of War Ragnarok because at least they would just stand there and wait for you to hit them. They won't just magically disappear 10,000 miles away from you, and then you have to catch up only for them to disappear again. Like, come on. They do not belong in the game. They can't belong in this game, especially because you have limited tools. That was a big rant, and yeah, because I was very annoyed. I'm Jisoo, but more importantly, I'm triggered. But thank God I don't have to do it all over again. I'm max level, I beat the game, whatever. But frankly, I love the game, but the boss design and some enemy design has to be thrown to the garbage and never come back. Bye bye.